Now recording.
Now recording.
All right, Craig.
Yeah, Craig, the record bot. Craig, the number one best tool I've ever found in my life. I was like, how am I going to record this on OBS? It's going to be a pain in the ass. I did this before. I'm going to have to record a video, and then I'm going to have to separate the audio from the video, and it's going to be a big, huge pain in my A, dude. But nah, this was so easy, so great. Anyone out there thinking, damn, dude, I'd really like to record a podcast online with my friends all over the world. Craig bot, Discord, works like a charm. 10 out of 10. Chef's kiss.
You haven't successfully uploaded anything from it yet.
I was so like, it was 5 o'clock. I sat down. I'm like, all right, recording at 6. And I was like, I don't really want to set up. It's like, is there what can I use? And people are like, why don't you just use Audacity? No, Audacity's a pain in the A for recording Discord because it wants inputs like from microphones that are attached to the computer. So that would have going to be a huge like workaround pain in the ass. OBS, I know how to do it, but it's recording a video and then there's like extra steps and it's bullshit. But then someone's like, why not just use Craigbot? And I'm like, what the fuck is Craigbot? I started reading it and I was like, this sounds pretty sick. I invited him to the server, gave him some permissions, created this channel, gave him permission to change his name, which is one thing he needed. Did it, joined, bam, flawless, worked instantly, sends me a download link, uploads it to my Google Drive. Perfect. Best. Like whoever made this thing, probably a guy named Craig. Dude.
He's old Craig.
You're my fucking hero. Like
Craigbot loves you.
Craigbot
is always listening.
Dude, Craigbot, developers of Craigbot, like, bravo, sir. Not even Apple makes things as easy to use as that. All right, anyways,
so
D&D podcast. You had the first topic. Why don't you tell us the topic?
Okay. Topic is investigation versus perception. How it's used in game.
Okay, yeah.
How
passive
it's
checks and
supposed
stuff.
to be used in game. How the passives are supposed to work. How they actually end up working in most games. Those facets of it.
What have you thought about? What do you think? How do you think it works? Have you read the rules? Like read the book?
I read the rules.
Okay, I read them today. The actual 5e rules.
I think I have an idea as to why no one uses them like that.
Oh, you mean like passive perception?
No, I just mean literal, like investigation check versus perception check.
Oh, okay. I was thinking.
So,
all right, yeah. Tell me what you think.
So,
give me a rundown.
Let's go over the rules first, right?
Okay.
So, an investigation check, when you look around for clues and make deductions based on those clues, use an investigation check.
Okay.
And perception check lets you spot, hear, or otherwise detect the presence of something.
Okay.
Okay. Measures general awareness of your surroundings and keenness force of your senses. So, investigation, from all the other stuff that I've read about, in the actual rule book, investigation, if used as written, which I don't think anyone ever does. Well, I want to talk about because you guys have played in lots of D&D games as well.
Yeah.
What, in most of your games, where does your DM generally draw the line between investigation and perception?
I think in like almost all the games I've ever played in, they're used interchangeably. I've been playing the game for years and years, 10, 15 years now. I've never, like, very rarely did they ask for one or the other. It's like, do you want to look for something? Or I'm going to look for something. And most of the time, it was a 50-50 coin toss, whether it was going to be perception or investigation. And sometimes it makes sense. Investigation makes sense sometimes, but, like, it kind of does the same thing as perception.
I think it all matters on what the person says. If I go, I want to take a look around the room, I think that's perception. You're looking around. But if you're like, I want to intently like investigate everything, I want to look around, I want to look for things, that's investigating.
And I've had it to where it's been like, perception is where you look without your hands, and investigation is when you like dig through stuff.
Yeah,
you're like
exactly. I agree with that.
Okay.
I like it that way.
So how does passive and like the passive part of this come in?
that's kind of where it comes into play. The passive investigation is moot at that point, right? If you're using it by like a hands-on search, there's no way you can
can't.
be passively looking through something.
I suppose, but like
I
yeah.
think for me it's like if you as a DM if you're like, okay, if they need to roll above a 15 investigation to find whatever they're looking for. If a person in the party has a passive perception of 15 or passive investigation of 15 or higher, I think you should just be like, okay, you know it. You find it.
You find
Take
it
a little
instantly.
bit of time, but you find it.
Okay. That
What do you
brings us into the passives part of it too. But let's back up and talk about just investigation versus perception again. So, based on that, it does make passive like the word before like passive meaning you're not actively doing something, but investigation, the way we sort of just talked about it, is an active thing. So that's the way I have seen it played. And I sometimes do that when I'm DMing. I go back, I sort of waffle on it because it has never really been super clear to me. And I think that the reason why is rules is written. It seems like investigation takes away player agency.
okay?
You get where I'm
Yeah.
going with that? So perception is like you see a wall and there's a spot on the wall that's clean and the rest of it is dusty.
Uh-huh.
Any player is going to be like, oh, that's something that's like a wall, secret door, something is there, right?
Uh-huh.
Investigation says you see that that is the role that allows you to know it's a secret door. But a player already can put that together. So that's what I mean by it takes away player agency. Like, oh, you didn't roll a high enough investigation. You just see a clean spot on the wall, nothing to see there because you rolled too low on your investigation.
I think maybe you're
But
overestimating.
I think that's where it needs to come in as a role playing aspect. You as a person know that's what we're looking for, but you have to think my character doesn't know that.
There's like
he
a
doesn't put two
metagaming
and two
aspect.
together. You have to go, I'm role playing. He doesn't know it. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
absolutely. But it's like that's the fun for some people, right? Is figuring out those small things. And if you're not allowed to figure those out as yourself because your character rolled too low, that feels bad sometimes.
well, like if I'm playing a character who's a big old dum-dum and has a -1 intelligence, therefore my investigation is absolute dog shit, right? It's
Mhm.
not like me as a person, I walk in and one of my partners goes, "You see that thing on the wall? That's just passive perception speaking, right?" And then
Mhm.
I look at it, and as a player, I'm like, "Absolutely, I know what that is. That's going to be a secret hole in the wall where you put things." But my character, who's a gigantic idiot, wouldn't know, right? And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to roll investigation," and I roll, and obviously I don't make it, or assuming I don't make it. I have to just, as a player, you have to just accept that that's how it comes out. But I get what you're saying because I've had definitely situations where everyone knows what's going on and everyone's like, "Well, I already rolled one. You want to roll an investigation? How about you? You roll an investigation." And everyone ends up rolling, and you're like, "I'm going to help him. No, you help him. Let's all help each other until we get this. I am going to stare at this wall until the DM tells me what I know is there."
Exactly.
So you have to separate yourself from the character in that sense, which honestly hasn't happened for a lot of my campaigns, but also realistically, I didn't role play a lot until the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But
I
also,
think what could also help in those situations where like their players aren't rolling well, so they're not finding out certain things, but they know it's there, so they have to keep on and keep on and keep on. Throw in like little things that like it took you guys this way too long to get through this, so now you're way behind something or something happens or something.
Are we trying to like solve this issue? Is that what we're trying to do? Like
we're just kind
come
of
up
talking about it. I mean, I don't think that there is a single solution for it. It
so
depends on the players, the campaign, the D. There's so many variables
I think
to
that
solve.
I think that there's a couple solutions to this. So like I ran a solo campaign for Joe. I guess we should have introduced ourselves. I'm Eric. Now that
I'm
we're into
Isaac.
this, okay. Joe,
I'm Joe.
there you go. Last person. So I ran a now that we're talking about this, we should have that. I ran a solo campaign for Joe, and I wrote in a bunch of things that he would have to like perceive and investigate, right? And it just went wrong the whole time. Where like
I was rolling real bad.
he rolled so bad so many times. And I gave him second chances. I was like, well, maybe you spot this thing. And he's like, okay. And he rolls again. And he still fails. So a campaign that, or like a one shot that could have lasted 5 hours lasted 2 because he just missed every single clue. And it ended up being a super duper straightforward guy goes, I need you to take care of this. He goes and takes care of it, misses all the hints, misses all the clues multiple times. And that's the end of the session, right? That's and you just let it be. You
But
let
that's
it
D&D. That's how it happens
Yeah.
sometimes.
you let it play out that way. That's one way to deal with it. Another way to deal with it is to like there's a secret door here, but no one found it, right? And you as a DM, you prepared for them to find this thing. So you just let them continue on and they find it again later in a different spot because the players don't have any knowledge about what's going to happen next. Only you do, only the DM does. So if they find another crack in a wall 5 rooms later and they investigate that one and they get it, it could lead to the same place as the last one without the player's knowledge. That's the way I think I'd handle it. If I
Sure.
really wanted them to see what was behind, door number 2.
Yeah, but that's the weirdness about it is that like rules as written seems like you would have to make a perception check and then make an investigation check based on what you could see, right? Does that make sense? It's
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
roll
your
a perception check. Okay, this is what you see. Now that that's what you see, roll an investigation check to see if you can put any of those things together. And that feels like that feels too far into role play sometimes.
What about like, and I've never once had this happen, but let's say you have a group of adventurers walk into room with dust on wall, and the check is a DC 13, not super high, and there's someone in the group that has a high enough passive perception to instantly see it. And he goes, "Hey guys, check that out." And someone else in the group has a high enough passive investigation to instantly know what it is without rolling. Do you let that happen or do you make the person roll?
I mean, it depends, I guess, on how crucial it is to the story, right? Because
If it's
because
super
at
crucial,
some
you want to
point-
let it happen.
yeah, of course. But like you gotta try to find that balance between rolling dice sometimes and not rolling dice always and not never rolling dice, right? Because like I don't want it to be, oh, your passives are high enough for everything, so nothing matters, or
Well,
you completely ignore everything. And it's like, oh, you have to make a perception roll. Now you have to make an investigation roll. Now you have to make some other kind of roll to see if you know what that means.
I think very rarely when I've DM'd have I even asked for investigation.
That's another thing I wanted to talk about is that because of the way investigation is used, sort of when it's used mostly, it's sort of interchangeable with perception. Kind of
So,
makes intelligence a pretty bad stat.
so do you obviously you've never played 3-5, right?
That is correct. Well, no, I played it. I played it once at Matt's, one of Matt's campaigns,
Oh, where
just like one day. So
was that
not-
before me?
No, you were there.
Then that was 4E, not 3-5.
What? No, it was
That was
Pathfinder.
Oh, it's Pathfinder. Yeah, sorry. That's mostly 3-5. So 4E and 5E skills are basically the same. But I think that this like the confusion that is coming up comes from the simplification of skills from 3-5 to 5 to 4 even, right? 4 was the big the dum edition, right? Where like anyone could pick it up and instantly play. And 5E is just like the tiniest turn of the dial harder than 4E was. But 3.5, and I don't want to like romanticize how good 3.5 was, but I do think the skills, there was enough variation in the skills that it made your character feel more unique and useful. So like now there's only perception, passive perception, investigation, passive investigation. But in 3.5 you had like spot, gather information, you had search, and then you had knowledges that were individualized for your character. So instead of like, I'm going to roll an arcana check to see what this magic item is, you would have to have like knowledge, arcane objects, right?
Okay.
I think reintroducing some of the skills from 3.5 into a 5e setting in like a homebrew way would help individualize characters more and kind of clear up the confusion between perception and investigation.
You think?
I think so, right? You walk into a room, someone does a quick scan of the room, whether rolled or passively, and they go, "All right, guys, I think I see something over there." And maybe you got a guy who, because the difference in I think the reason that there is a perception and an investigation is so that your int boys will have something to do when your super wisdom boys are like stealing the whole show, right? It's about balancing that out. That's the only reason a sorcerer uses charisma to cast spells. It's because they were like, oh, what the hell does charisma do? Oh, we'll give it to sorcerers and warlocks, right? Warlocks are charisma as well.
Yeah.
We got to give it to someone. We'll give it to them because it can't all be intelligence. But what does your wizard or your sorcerer do when they walk into a room and their perception is -1 or 1? They don't really do anything. They're like, my eyeballs don't work. I don't see anything. And then you have a ranger on the other side of the room who didn't even like glance, and he's like, see that thing over there? That's pretty suspicious.
I can smell it from here.
I can smell the mystery from here, you know? And then that gives your players an opportunity to hand off, right? Your ranger goes, I think I see something over there, but he can't really investigate it because he's a moron. So he asks the wizard, and the wizard's like, let me take a look. And that gives an opportunity for every player to have a role. But it's almost too broad. The definition of perception, the definition of investigation, rules as written, is almost too broad, and they overlap too much. Whereas if you had a 4-person crew or a 5-person crew, and one of them was like, oh, I used to be on the town guard murder mystery and section or whatever. I was with Scooby in the gang, and my gather information skill is really high or whatever. To like boil it down further, to like give individuality to characters, that is, I think, a little lacking in 5e's character creation system.
Yeah, you can sort of homebrew some of that stuff, just in the fact, like, if you've written a backstory and you're like, I was, apprentice of a jewel crafter. You could then be like, if you needed to make a roll for, because I think, like, knowing the value of something was a 3.5 skill, and it's not in 5e.
Praise.
Yeah.
I have a character
like,
pulled up.
You could be like, you see this ring, like, do I know how much it was worth? Being the apprentice of a jewel crafter, you could be like, roll intelligence and add your proficiency, and there's like a homebrew way to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's easy enough. It's just the investigation versus perception is still a little bit weird, just because it seems to be, they seem to want to be very different things, but one seems dependent on the other, which is weird.
Yeah, and it's
I think it's like whenever you perception, you see it. Like you said, like, this spot on the wall is not dusty. Now you have to investigate that
and try to find
out why, like, what it is. So I think that's the distinction. Like, that's like you're saying, you have to use perception to be able to investigate.
Right, and that feels weird to me. It's like, why does that seems,
because just
making
because
extra rolls just because seems weird.
I think it's because, like, just because you see something doesn't mean you understand how it works. Right?
Sure, and there are lots of instances that you could make that would be like, oh, you see this log, it has a crack in it, and it sounds, if you're describing everything as you go a decent amount, then you can throw in little things like that would mean something, right? But if you're only throwing in those little descriptions only when they mean something already,
How much
then
how much do you think you as a DM should intervene, right? You go like, they're walking along in the forest. Someone's got a pretty high passive perception. And you're like, hey, yo, dingle dong, you see a crack in that log over there. And do you let the players decide if that's important? Like, let's say you've been describing stuff the whole time. Do you let the players decide if that's important, or do you like nudge them in the direction? Maybe you guys should check that out. You know,
well,
that's like the forgiving way to do it. But the unforgiving way is to be like, there's a crack in that log. And he goes, okay, yeah, sure. There's cracks in all these logs. Let's go.
the way that I choose to handle that, and this ties into the way I try to use passive investigation and perception and insight to a certain degree, is I only really use the passive to allow a player to make a roll. Right. So I use the passive in two ways. I use it for one, if there is something like we'll use an investigation as an example. You see that, like, I'm describing things, you go, there's a crack in the log, and everyone's like, oh, okay, and they start talking like, your passive investigation is kind of high, go ahead and make me an investigation check. And if they beat it, then I'd be like, that log means something, blah blah blah. But if either no one talks about it and no one's passive investigation is very high, then I would probably just let it go.
Well, like, I misunderstood the topic, but me and Joe were talking about the passives, and like, I think it's like, that seems perfectly reasonable. What you just described sounds 100% reasonable to me. At the same time, like, if I'm the DM and there's a sneaky guy trying to sneak up on him, and I roll the guy's stealth check and it's a 12, and one of my players has a passive perception of 13, he doesn't need to actively look.
Yeah,
To see
he
these
should
things.
just see him.
That is the other way that I use passive perception, is specifically against stealth rolls.
That's definitely how that should be, because he didn't beat my check.
Yeah, he didn't beat.
And the big thing is like, if we're out somewhere in the forest or wherever, even if we're in a city, usually characters, I would think adventurers and stuff, are always on guard, checking around,
Semi-aware, yeah.
aware of their surroundings.
If they're proficient.
That's why that's why they have the passive perception. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so that's the other way that I like to use passive, is that if it's, instead of having everyone roll a perception check just out of nowhere, if there's a monster or a person stealthing around them and they make a stealth roll and it's not higher than the highest person's passive, then that person gets, I'd say, hey, you hear something, behind you. They don't necessarily like, hey, there's a person standing over there, but they get a distinct tip that they are being followed.
Right. And I don't think, like, if the guy that we don't see, he rolls higher than everyone's passive perception, we shouldn't get an opportunity to see him, because we don't.
Right.
We don't notice it. We're not like actively going, we're looking for someone. We feel their eyes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's kind of the flip side of that I try to use, is whenever you guys are like actively looking for something, your passive goes out the window. So like if you're setting up camp and you're making perception checks for watch, I ignore the passive, because you guys are actively doing it, and if you roll poorly, that's because your character just like lost his focus or something, and it's sort of something happened unfortunate in the story.
But that makes sense, in especially in like watch. Whenever people are on watch, it's like late at night, everyone's tired. It would make sense that you'd be like, okay, I can't stay awake or something. There's a bunch of different excuses you could use in those options of why your perception would be lower or not the same.
Have you ever thought about I've toyed around with this idea a few times. I've never actually tried to put it in action, but having like a baseline. Right? Having a baseline. Maybe it's not as high as the passive. Like if your passive perception is a 15, then you can never go lower than a 10 if you're trained.
I don't like using the passives as a way to avoid natural ones.
I only want to do it like the way I've thought about it is I only want to do it for stuff that you're actively trained in, right? Like I've never if I think of a skill that I have honed over my whole life, right? I never have a day where I explode the thing I'm working on because I rolled a 1. There is always a baseline of I'm always starting from somewhere, right?
Yeah, the bad part about that is it's already a thing for rogues. Like that is a thing in their class that they get. That like if you once you get a certain level, if you're proficient in something, anything you roll on the die becomes that D20 becomes a 10.
Yeah.
So I feel like adding that to everyone really cheapens it for the rogue who is like a skill monkey, right? Like that's part of the rogue's kit is that they're really good at skills.
But maybe that's just like a poor design choice when the game was made, right? Like if you have a cleric who's been a healer, medicine man, doctor, whatever you want to call it, for 15 years before the adventure starts, and you start at if you start at level 1, sure, but if you start in level like 4, 3, something like that, you're a trained individual already. Like if I go to check someone's wound to see if it's lethal or not, I shouldn't be able to roll so low that well, never seen this, or like I don't know if that's lethal or not.
I don't know. I agree with.
pierces
I think you
lung.
should be able to roll low on things like that. Everybody has a bad day. You make one mistake on trying to patch somebody up, and I mean,
I
you
suppose,
kill 'em.
and I don't have,
And I will say, like, it's like we might be trained, but we're not experts at level 3 at certain things. Like, let's say the cleric's out of spells and he has to do a medicine check to like stop somebody from bleeding. He's not an expert. That's like a medic in the army.
What
They're
if
not
you,
they're not an expert doctor. They just
but they would
are
know
there
if
to
something was
quickly
lethal.
patch somebody up.
I feel like they'd know if something was lethal. What about like?
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the work they could act like not do things properly that leads to this guy not living.
What about tying it to instead of whether you're proficient, why not tie it to sorry, god dang, I can't my brain, your actual ability score. Like if you have a 20 in something, you're very good at it, right? Like if you have a 20 intelligence or a 20 strength or a 20 dex, if you have a 20 dex and you're proficient in acrobatics, very rarely are you fucking up, right? And
but I mean there's still
I will say
I
it
don't know.
feels as a player who's had this happen before plenty of times over the years, it feels real shitty to be like, oh, I have a dex of 20. I'm proficient in acrobatics. My acrobatics is a plus 10, and I fail 3 acrobatic checks in a row. Like, what are the odds of that? Almost none. And sometimes it can happen multiple times in a session, and that can be so disheartening.
That's just the fun part. That's like
that's
the
odds,
randomness.
Yeah.
That's D&D.
Yeah, that's D&D. If you take away that, then it's just like, yes, you always succeed at this no matter what.
Not always succeed, but like at least a minimum level of proficiency in that thing. Like that person might be an idiot, so they're not going to be able to investigate very well.
Considering passives and stuff, I feel like it all really just comes down to the DM. If the DM doesn't want people to be able to passively perceive something, make the DC one higher than the highest guy's passive perception.
Yeah, and you totally have that freedom, right? Like if you want someone to investigate something, if you want the players to have to investigate it, who's got the highest investigation check? Make it a tick harder than that.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously the easiest way to do it. I mean, and as a DM, you can literally just interpret the rules however you want.
And you don't have to tell them the DC, so you can just totally fucking lie, right? The DC is 9 and they have a passive of 12. You can just be like,
nope, 13.
Yep. Yeah. You need to roll, dude.
It's 12 and a half, actually. Sorry.
Sorry, you missed it, dude. I need you to roll investigation. But I think a discussion has to happen, I think, at the beginning of a campaign where you're like, listen, guys, here's how I want this to work. That way the players have an expectation of how it's going to work and will kind of force their brains into thinking, you walk into a room and you know to ask, do I see anything with my passive, right? Or I want to do I see anything? If no, I should probably investigate this because this looks important, right? Whereas if you
Yeah, and
have
I
if you have nothing, it's hard to know.
yeah, I typically try to use passive as a when you are actually being passive. Like if you're walking around a town talking to the rest of your group, not really like actively paying attention to what's going on around you, that's
Yeah.
when the passive thing kicks in. If you guys are walking through a dungeon or up like through a forest, and I'm saying who's keeping lookout, that person doesn't get passive; they get active only. Now, if the back of the thing, if you guys aren't being stealthy and like the back of the group is sort of chatting a little bit, then maybe one of their passives picks up something that the guy who's actively looking is just too he can't see the forest for the trees type of thing, right?
Tunnel visioning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. Should add a distraction mechanic. What are
I mean,
you doing?
That's essentially what the D20 is a distraction mechanic.
Mechanic,
If
yeah.
it's low, you got distracted.
Like it's like, what are you doing right now? Oh, well, I'm having a cup of tea and looking around the room. Okay, your passive perception applies. But if you're
Something
like,
flew in your eye.
yeah, oh man, you roll a calamity die, right? Oh, look, a bug flew into your eye, right? that feels bad. I bet like you're like the god of perceiving, and you trip and mud gets in your eyes, and you can't see anything for a week or something.
You're blinded for 3 days. Your passive perception is dropped by 10.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Something brutal, absolutely brutal. I don't think it should be impossible, but I think that passives should play a bigger role than I feel that they play in most of the campaigns I've played in. Where
I
most of the
feel
time it feels like the passive does literally nothing. I walk into a room and I'm like, so I got a passive perception of 15. Do I see anything? And very rarely do I ever have a DM go, yes, there is something in the room, right? It's just like, nope, you don't see anything because you're not actively looking.
Yeah, I feel like the passive thing it seems like it was added to help DMs like tell their players that there's something important that they aren't looking for, right?
Yeah.
So to that end, sure, you can use it like that and it's great. But I hate the idea of having a passive thing be your floor. That I don't like that at all. Same thing with because insight's the other passive you can have. And the way I use passive insight is very similar. It's like your passive insight is telling you something. You should roll me an insight check, and then that gets them on the idea that, oh, I should be paying attention to this guy, right? And then
Yeah.
they roll it, and if it's high enough, then they learn something, and if it's low enough, the player still learns something. And while technically metagaming, there's always some sort of you can't avoid metagaming completely because your players would just never do anything, right?
Passive insight's the one that I really don't like being in.
I don't
like insight that much because especially if like I just met this guy, now I can pick him apart
instantly. I hate with a passion insight checks. I'm not saying like if you know someone, like if me and Joe are hanging out, I've hung out with Joe a fuckload, right? It's easier for me to read him, right? And him to read me, or me to read someone like my parents. It's easier for me to read their faces and read their intention because I've been around them forever. But a perfect stranger that I'm talking to, dude, your insight, even if you're a person who's good at that, I feel like you might pick up on the wrong things and be completely wrong a lot of the time, most of the time. And it almost takes away any risk, right? You talk to this person, they're like, listen, boys, here's this thing. And you're like, insight check, 19. Oh, the guy is lying instantly. You know that. And it's like, okay, but then it kind of ruins what could otherwise be extremely interesting story beats.
I feel like that's kind of on the DM though. Your insight doesn't have to just be a lie detector.
But that's what it is most of the time, right? Have you ever had it not be that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't try to use it that way. Especially with people you just met and people are like insight check. I'll be like, here's the vibe he's giving you. He seems like a salesman, he seems like he's not necessarily trying
Okay,
to
maybe this guy is not telling the truth, or maybe he's really uncomfortable in the situation. It doesn't give you the full, like, this guy's just blatantly lying to us, or
because that's like a common.
we need to
face
be able to
thing.
discern it. We shouldn't get answers from it. We should just get things that might give us an idea of what could be going on.
Yeah, that's like a common face rating thing, and like I've had that backfire on me super hard while playing like Werewolf or Mafia or whatever, where someone is like, they look really like, I don't really know them, but I'm playing the game with them, and they're just kind of looking around and they're acting kind of weird, and you're like, it's definitely this person. Everyone, we gotta hang this guy. He is definitely the bad guy. And then you do it, and he's like, I was a citizen, and it's like, what were you doing with your face?
Well, see, that's the difference between like how I want to use insight versus how it's typically used. Is you would be like, this person is clearly uncomfortable, but you don't tell them why they're uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
This,
That's
this
how it should be.
This person seems uncomfortable to you. That you don't know necessarily if they're lying, but there is a certain fidgetiness to them around you that you're picking up on.
Yeah. It could be just as simple as they're uncomfortable because they don't know you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way I try to use insight, is to just let the player know the sort of the feeling that they're getting, not, oh, this guy's lying to you.
Yeah, I know, and that's how it's used.
You can certainly, like, I just the last game that we played, you guys incited Truth Digger. I was like, he 100% believes what he's telling you, and that's how I used it. Yes, he seems completely sincere and complete, like 100%. He is into what he is saying. There's no, it does not seem to be any kind of I don't want to use the word deception, but there's no fidgetiness. He's not gone off course once. He believes what he's saying.
Let's say later down the line, you want to make Truth Digger, like, turns out he was playing us the whole time, right? Does that, do the players feel like their insight was diminished for the situation, or is it?
I don't think so.
Saying?
I think that if that were,
I think that just means he played the part well.
Yeah, I think that if that were to pop up later, then the players are like, oh, this guy is certainly more than meets the eye, because I was looking for this and didn't catch any of it. Even if they rolled like a really high insight, then that tells you that this guy is, this guy is really good at this one thing, at least.
Yeah.
It sort of gives you a threat level. If I roll really high and still didn't pick it up, and later it turns out to be a thing that I missed, then I know that guy, I know more about that guy still than I did before.
I've never had that happen in a campaign, by the way. like a total reversal of what we thought had happened in that way that I just described.
But I think that would bring really awesome moments into D&D where
it totally could.
Shit.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That guy completely fooled us.
Yeah.
Because that's what would happen in real life. You'd be like, holy fuck, no way.
Turns out I was the one stealing the Cheetos out of the cabinet the whole time. No,
I am the Cheeto thief.
I am so good at it.
How could you betray the truth seeker so much?
And you were like, I killed my brother because I thought he was stealing the Cheeto.
That's on you.
I convinced you that it was him by planting Cheeto dust on his desk.
There's a whole montage about how I did it.
Yeah, right. The truth is out in the air now, boys.
What say you?
What say you?
Cheetos now?
Oh, man. That would be fantastic. That would just be too fucking good. It is but like, looping back around to our main topic, I get why there is a, like, it does seem strange, but I think it really actually just boils down to, we need to give every player something to do at any given time.
Oh, wow. Another thing I wanted to mention about investigation versus perception. spells, illusion spells specifically, like disguise self or minor illusion, require an investigation check to see through. So,
because a little deeper,
about
right?
Having talked about the way that we just said that they have their rules written as investigation versus perception.
Yeah,
that makes it weird for me. It doesn't quite add up.
I think for me, perception is looking, investigation is discerning. You're picking something apart, you're investigating it, you're picking it apart, whereas perception, you're just looking.
And that's what I thought at first. But then I read the line at the end of Minor Illusion. If a creature discerns the illusion for what it is, the illusion becomes faint to the creature.
That's just weird. That's a hard one to like.
And I know that these were probably written by separate people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was obviously some missed crosstalk there, and that's most likely what happened, but it makes it weird. Because that's one of the if something becomes faint to you, that is clearly a perception thing, not an investigation thing.
I think, but it required you to discern that it wasn't real, so now you know it's magic, and because of that, the effect lessens against you, so you can see that it's not real.
Yeah,
sure.
Think about like you're watching a movie. When you're just perceiving the movie, you're just watching. You're not trying to pick it apart. But like if you've seen a movie a few times, you're in quotes investigating it kind of further. Like you've watched this movie 5 times and you're like, man, I love this movie. But then you're watching and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Continuity errors.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't make sense. How could they have not known this? Me and Joe have been watching Harry Potter again. And like I watched it 6 months ago for the first time.
Movie, like, there's at least one spot where we're like okay.
Okay, there's a ton of stuff. So like I watched it a few months ago when I had COVID. I watched it all again, but I hadn't watched it in like 5 years. I was perceiving those movies. I was just watching them, right? I was just enjoying them. I'm watching them again now with Joe not too long later, and I'm investigating the movie. Like the big one for me was in the first movie when he gets handed the cloak of invisibility. He gets that for Christmas or whatever.
Yeah.
And Ron says something like, whoa, those are incredibly rare. Those are really rare. Or those are really rare. No, you find out later, they're not just incredibly rare. There is literally one of these in existence, and it's not even fully known by the entire wizarding community if it's completely real or if it's a myth. This thing should be the literal one of the most valuable objects in the entire series, and nobody knows about it. It's a little rare. Horse shit, it's a little rare. It's literally an irreplaceable, uncreatable piece of magical object that they should have known about. But that's just the author not knowing that they were going to make that a big deal later in the books.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like that. I investigated it, but I wasn't just perceiving it, because watching through it.
Once you spot the illusion, you're like, I'm in a room and I'm just looking at a TV.
Yeah, exactly.
And the illusion becomes faint.
Yeah. That's what it is. I think that's a pretty good description of the difference between perception and investigation.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
I'm still upset that you would have to roll twice though. Like, make a perception check. That's what you see. Make an investigation check. Nope, you make nothing out of all that.
But that's where the passive could come in. Like, you'd be like, okay, you see this, but you need to try to discern what's going on here.
Yeah.
So you just roll the investigation.
Seeing it is the first step to understanding.
Then when would you ever roll investigation?
Then
you roll it after you see something, or after someone else sees something.
You can see it, like minor illusion. You see that. Now you have to roll the investigation to discern if it's a minor illusion or if it's real.
So you're talking about using passive investigation as a floor?
No, I'm talking about like your passive perception is what lets you see it. Now you have to discern what it is. So you roll the investigation to figure out what's going on. That's the same thing with like hidden doors. You see that there's a crack right here, but now you need to investigate why. Like, is it a door? Is it a shelf that moves up? Is there going to be something behind it? Do we need to find a lever?
Which book on the bookcase do I need to pull out? You know,
right.
So I'm trying to get this. Is your suggestion that you only roll one and use passive for the other?
Yes.
Actually, yeah, that's good. I like that. That sounds good to me.
And as a DM, you got to discern what you want your characters to be trying to do.
Like if I'm the guy who doesn't know how to perceive, like I'm not the perceive guy, I'm the investigation guy. I'm gonna walk in and I'm probably not gonna say, I take a look around the room. Someone
And
else
that was like the thing with the last session. Whenever we went into his house and we saw that wall with all the stuff, you perceive that he has a wall full with a bunch of papers. We see that. We perceive that. That's our passive. We can see that. But we need to investigate to see what's actually on these papers and what's labeled and what he's actually doing with all this. So we would roll the investigation to figure out what's going on.
I don't know if it works in it's like in that instance. I would think in that instance the investigation would be more to if you can determine how he's come to those conclusions, right? Because those are the things that it just says on the wall.
Maybe it's like perception is the description of the room. Right? I walk in. I want to look. I'm taking a quick glance. That's what a perception is. And you, as the DM, might have to be like, okay, he rolled pretty low. I'm going to give a weaker description of the room. Whereas if he rolled really high, you're like, ah, man, you notice that this room has got just their stuff everywhere, and you notice this really strange thing on the wall, and you're not too sure about it. And here's a description of the floor, and here's a description of the humidity in the room, and here's a description of this and this. More detailed description, the better the perception check is. And then
that could be how you do it.
Yeah.
You get a little bit of information with your passive, but if you want to see things better, you need to actively look around the room to take a look. And then you roll that. Then you have to roll perception to get higher to see if you can discern some things.
Like you're talking to the guy, but you're like looking at that wall because it's catching your eye. Boom, boom, boom. Perception that finds it, and then you see the thing, and you're like, I should really take a closer look at that. And then you roll investigation. Yeah. I don't think making 2 rolls in that situation is the wrong thing to do, and I think that feels, in the way that we just described it, feels natural. I can see how it doesn't feel natural in the moment. But I think realistically, that's how that kind of scenario would play out, right?
Yeah.
Like if I walked into your house, Isaac, tomorrow, never been there in my life. I walk in and the first thing I'm doing is passively perceiving. I'm not looking at the room, I'm looking at you. You open the door. Hey, Eric, what's up? I'm like, sick, man. What's up? Love your place. I take a look around. That's active perception. I'm looking around the room. I see a knickknack on the wall and I go, oh, what's that knickknack, dude? Then I'm going to, can I look at that? And you go, yeah, sure. Then I'm actively investigating the thing that I perceived. Right? Oh, and I walk up to it and I pick it up. Is this a Tibetan singing bowl? And you're like, oh, it absolutely is. And I'm like, this is incredible. Where'd you get this? And you're like, I bought it from the crystal shop down the road. Let me show you how to use it. Or it has a little tool and I'm like, can I try this? And you're like, give it a shot. And I try it and I make it sing or whatever, or I don't. That depends on my investigation of how it works. If my investigation isn't high enough, I can't figure out that you have to ding it, then move the little felt thing around the bowl to make it go wah. And then I'd have to be like, do you know how to do this? And you'd be like, absolutely, let me show you. And that could be even a different check from that, which is like a persuasion or a performance, right? It's something like that. So it doesn't feel unnatural when I describe it like that. But at the beginning of this recording that we're doing, I understood what you were saying, which is like, yeah, that does seem weird. Why am I perceiving and then investigating? But that's why you're perceiving and then investigating.
Yeah, I get why that way. It feels like it can really bog things down if you're doing that every time, right?
That depends on the amount of players. I think that the pace of a game almost entirely depends on how many players do you have and how experienced are they? If you have,
that is a big component, yeah.
That is a massive component because I have played in campaigns that have 6 players that are all very skilled players, and it moves not fast. Like you're not moving at a clip. It is still slow because there's a lot of players, but it's considerably faster than running a 5 or 6 person game with a group of people who have absolutely no idea how to play. Because like I ran a campaign a long time ago. It was my first DM. I was first time DMing. I was DMing for Joe, his friends, and a mutual friend of ours. There's 5 or 6 people. That that went excruciatingly slow until everyone got a hang of it, right?
I feel like
And
that can go both ways though, because if you're in an like a more sort of non-combat situation, then your inexperienced players are just going to let you tell the story, and it's going to go by very quickly.
Then you have to, then as a DM, you have to discern what your players want to get out of the thing. When I used to play on Sundays, I don't know how, like, the DMs, I never DM'd in that group, but I don't know how some of the DMs didn't notice that, like, this is, I don't want to name anyone. This is not, these people playing this are here to hang out, and if they're into it because they're mini wargaming players, right? They want to show up, they want to roll dice and punch things. That's all they want to do. They don't want to investigate, they don't want to look, they don't want to solve any puzzles, they don't want to role play. You have to read the room or find out what the room is like after the first session.
Well,
and
that's
then
why you need a
tailor
session 0.
Yeah, and then tailor the campaign based on those interests, right? Because no matter the campaign, like, you have to get everyone on the same page. And if everyone's there to role play and solve puzzles and do cool stuff, but if you have one guy who likes to fight stuff, you can have that stuff, but you also have to just, go monkey mode. You get attacked by goblins and you do that. But the players who don't want to engage in that at all, it will take forever because they'll be like, so if there's a mini wargaming type and you go, you guys need to solve this thing, and here's the clue, and they're going to spend 45 minutes discussing if the rules even apply to what you just did, instead of just accepting the fact that you're the DM and you have the final say on rules.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a group who's wanting to role play, you're going to say, here's a role playing scenario, and they're just going to take it and run with it. And they're not going to be like, well, on page 145, chapter 7, subsection B of the Dungeon Master's Guide, it says that that's not how that this rule works. And I ran into this problem where, like, a 3-hour session, we would get one thing accomplished because we discussed everyone wanted to discuss whether there was
that turns into a place where the DM has to be like, look, guys, I'm the DM right now, we'll look it up afterwards, or this is the way I'm running it, this is my rules.
That's part of the reading the room. Because if they don't like that and you're the DM and you go, listen, guys, we just need to move on, my word is final, then half of your players aren't going to like that, and then the campaign's going to fall apart.
That is possibly the hardest part about being a DM, is making sure everyone gets something out of each session.
Yeah, it's getting something that they want out of each session.
You
cannot have that,
depending
you cannot
on how
have
their
that,
nature of players are.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes you cannot do it every session. But that's fine. It's fine if someone has a boring session, because their big moment could be coming soon or next or whatever the case may be. If Johnny Punch 'em Ups just wants to show up and roll dice and punch goblins and, kick little kids or whatever the fuck he wants to do, whatever he wrote into his backstory.
This guy sounds like a jerk.
Yeah. Like, he's a big, huge jerk and he just wants to beat people up. That's all he wants to do, dude. He just wants to fight. He also has to, like, there has to be like a give and take.
A give and take, yeah. Like, he has to understand, if he's the only one like that, it's not going to be hardcore fighting every time. You're going to get those, but
like, I like to punch him up. I like to fight. I like fighting because all I have to think about is, like, how can I most efficiently fight this thing? How can I most efficiently do damage? What's the best way for me to do this? I'm trying to change that about myself, but I like doing that. So in sessions where there's a ton of role play, and especially in sessions where there's a ton of role play and I'm not interested in the role play, sure, I don't have a lot to do and I'm just kind of sitting there and I'm a little bored, but I let it happen because I know everyone else is having a good time and I know that there's a cool fight coming eventually, right? This role play leads to a cool fight. This role play leads to the thing that I like, right? And I'm willing to give up my own entertainment for a portion to allow other people to enjoy what they're doing.
Yep.
And that's what leads to a good group.
Everybody
has to be willing to, like, be like, okay, I had my time to shine last time. It's time to let other people shine.
Like,
Have fun.
like the truth. What's that guy? What was the guy's name? Truth Taker or whatever.
Truth digger.
Truth Digger. Like, perfectly candidly, I couldn't have given a fuck less. But I knew that we were getting ready to do a cool expedition where we go through the jungle and fight crabs and shit, right? Whatever it might be, I know that, like, I'm not interested in this part right here. There might be role-playing scenarios where I am interested, but that one in particular, couldn't give enough fuck less about.
But to be fair, that's how your character would be anyway.
Yeah, that's how my character would be anyways. But, like, I let that part play out. I do my own thing for while that's happening because I'm not interested in it. But I know that something cool is going to happen, so this is a payoff, right? And there's no need for me to be like, guys, could we stop doing this because it's fucking boring. I just want to punch people.
Whatever.
I just want to punch people, dude. I want to kick animals and punch people. You know what I mean? If an alligator attacks me, I want to bash his head in. That's what I want to do. It doesn't even matter. The rest of it doesn't even matter, right? Like, you let the boring parts pass, and, like, sometimes that means if the whole session is a role play session and it's not role play I'm interested in, I can just be there. That way, in case someone asks me something, right? And I can do something else on the side. And that's easier to do when you play online than in person, to be fair. Yeah. Because in person, you're just, like, sitting there. And you're, like, rolling dice. And, like, if you're me, you're fidgeting because I'm, like... But, once again, I'm giving up my own enjoyment so that other people can enjoy what they like. That's why I always tell, like... That's why I always tell, like, Brian not to apologize at the end when he thinks he takes up too much time. Like, if he's having a good time, so be it. And if that good time is scrolling through a library for an hour and a half, sure, it was a boring session for me, but he was fucking stoked, and that's good enough, right? I know that the punch 'em ups is coming soon. I'm gonna get to punch him, but I gotta wait out this library sesh before I get to punch him up, dude.
Yeah. Speaking of punch 'em ups, I thought that your individual punch 'em up was going to go a little longer than it did, but that's okay.
Oh, against the crab?
No, against the Shinlu.
Oh, well, yeah, see? And that's just like a total shot in the dark. I just so happened to roll a crit and absolutely fucking annihilate him in 2 turns. But, like, even though it wasn't a long extended punch 'em up, it was a fucking cool punch 'em up because suddenly I go from being guy who's kind of known to here's this undefeated fighter no one can beat, and I take him out in 10 seconds. Like, oh, this guy isn't just good, he's a fucking freak. And that like feeds into the feedback loop of the character, right? And that's cool. I got to punch him up, I got to develop the character, and now everyone thinks I'm a badass, even if I'm not. Right?
Hooray.
Hooray. I'm kicking ass and taking names. How much damage did I do to that crab in 1 round? I knew it had to be. It was a ton.
Lot.
It was a ton. It was so much.
I was adding it on there. I was like, man, this is. He's taking a lot of damage. He did a lot to you though, so
he did a lot to me. Yeah, I mean, like, I had to get a heal in a second win. I had 10 health at one point. Like, if it had been its turn again, I would have gone down if I hadn't gotten a heal and everything before.
Yep. Your second wind, I mean,
and the heal.
Those rolls is why I put the item as it is. Just to help out a little bit, because I know that it sucks when you're like, yeah, I'm going to use my second wind and I'm level 15. Oh, I heal for 4.
I got 4 HP added onto my 200 HP pool. Yeah, at level 10, at level 15, that's not even a quarter of 1 hit. Sometimes. But anyways, I think, you know what? I think this went fantastic, boys.
There you go. Beauty.
I think that are you satisfied with the answers that we've provided today, Isaac?
Sure. I mean, I'm going to think about those in the future. I don't know how much it will change what I'm already doing, but it will influence it at least.
Mm-hmm. I think we did a good job defining the differences. And I think
one quick question.
Oh, okay, yeah, hit me.
Do you investigate for traps or do you perceive for traps?
You investigate for traps.
You investigate for traps.
What if you do you perceive first?
If you perceive first, I don't think you perceive a trap.
Yeah,
I think a trap.
I think whenever you're looking for traps, you're going, I'm looking for traps. That's why if you don't say that, you're not looking for traps, and traps are meant to be hidden.
Tangent
You
time.
wouldn't
Here we
know about
go.
it.
Here we go. Tangent time.
So you
You
have
give
to
me a
investigate for
You have to
traps.
investigate. Yeah, you have to investigate. You give me a mission where I have to go sneak into the enemy's base and steal the MacGuffin, right? I should assume that they don't want that MacGuffin stolen, and I need to look for traps. Otherwise, I just get blasted by a fucking trap if I'm not looking for it.
One of the examples it gives in the rules is roll perception for traps to see if there is, say, a plate on the ground that you can step on.
Okay.
You roll investigation to then see if you can figure out how to disarm it, and then roll a thieves' tools check to try to disarm it once you know how to.
I did not know that's how it was written in 5e, but that seems like too many steps.
That's
You should.
that was my concern. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you walk into a room, you perceive the room, but if you're not actively looking for a trap, you
You're
don't
not
even
gonna
know what
see
you're not going to see it, right? If you go, man, this room's looking pretty sus. I'm going to investigate for some traps, dude. If you find a trap and then you want to do a thieves' tool check, or
Yeah.
like if it's a plate on the ground and I want to throw a book at it from across the room, sure, that can be a solution. It doesn't even have to be thieves' tools. It can be a creative solution. But I know that from DMing myself, it is super duper annoying to set up some cool traps that you've put a lot of thought into, to have someone walk in the room, glance around and go, is that an invisible wire right there? Hey guy, go check
Trap.
that out. And I think there's a
Trap.
trap right there.
Trap.
I saw a 100% imperceptible thing. Go check that out. And he checks it out and he's like, "Oh yeah, no problem. Let me pull from this bag of infinite tools to solve this problem instantly." Where realistically, they wouldn't know there's a trap in there. And if someone doesn't go, I investigate for traps, and then they find it. The problem with traps, I think, inherently is as soon as there's one trap that hits someone,
Everyone's like, I gotta
It's-
investigate. I gotta
it
investigate.
slows the whole game
A
down
lot of rolls.
because they
But I
go,
think that's where you could use passive investigation. Whereas once you
Yeah.
you recognize that there's traps in here, you need to let the DM know, hey, we're always checking for traps
yeah,
in
and the
each
passive
room.
is that.
That's whenever if the passive meets the qualifications, then you see the traps. But if it doesn't, then you have to roll.
But then that's just the DM deciding on whether or not you find a trap.
I've never had traps go well, and I've really wanted to make traps work a lot of times. But as soon as you introduce a trap, the game slows down exponentially. Like
Yeah,
it just keeps building forever. Oh, that one time a year ago at the start of this campaign, there was a trap. So now every session, every time I take 10 feet of movement in a zone I don't know about that isn't a
Trap?
forest, I'm like,
Trap
there's a
here?
trap here?
I think a big thing that could help speed it up is like we have a rogue in our group. That's the guy who looks for traps.
He's the trap
Or
guy.
whoever deals with traps. That's the guy who deals with them. He's the only one who's rolling. If he goes, hey, it's clear because he rolled bad and there's actually a trap, that's on him, and then we all get hurt. But that's on him. It should only be him looking. Everybody else should just trust your friends. You're in a party. You trust this guy to be the trap
The
finder.
trap guy. Yeah. And like
Yeah, so
everyone else
that's-
is bad at finding traps because they don't
That's
know
why
what
you
traps to
can't
find.
let. Yeah, at some point as a DM, you have to be like, no, you can't all roll. Only one person is checking for traps.
Because
Yeah,
he's
and
a
that's
trap
the-
expert
that's
and you're a schlub.
Because what happens is the guy checking for trap rolls a 2, and then the next person goes, well, I'm going to check for traps too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you don't know he rolled a 2.
You don't know
Yeah.
that. He
Your
thinks
trap
it's all
expert
clear.
just said it's clear.
Yeah. Your trap guy said it's clear. It's for all you know, it's clear whether you know it as a player or not.
And that's the you mentioned like the passive investigation for traps, and that feels real bad to me.
Yeah.
Because then it's just like, oh, you found a trap, or oh, it's the DM deciding on whether you take the time to roll a thieves' tools check or if you just run into a trap. and that feels like taking away too much agency.
I think traps could be an entire episode.
That's true. We'll stop it there then.
Yeah, how to like implement traps. I'd have to think about how to implement traps. I've never had a session where
I'll
traps
look up
didn't
like
learn
other
everything.
people's opinions on it too, like get some information together.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
see what
yeah.
I think
That could be
right.
a full thing instead of us like BSing for another 20 minutes about.
All right, there you go. There's your next topic. Traps.
All right, next episode, traps, how they function
On the next episode of
whatever this is.
whatever this is called. Okay,
Trap.
you want to hear my name suggestion?
Sure.
Since we're not doing the Deft and Dorky podcast now, I want to call this
Yeah.
Rules Lawyers.
Okay. I mean,
Or
is
rules
that not
lawyer.
taken already?
Produced
It's not.
by
I looked it up.
Deft and
There's not a single podcast called Rules Lawyer.
I am amazed. Literally, you could have bet me like $100 and I would have taken that bet.
I looked it
There's
up.
one out there.
I looked it up on my podcasting app, Overcast, which covers Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. It covers all of them. It's like I can't think of the word because I'm thinking about D&D. It's just a platform that combines them all, right?
Okay.
And I went to search for, I'll do it right now. I'm searching for podcast, Rules Lawyer.
No, nothing.
No.
But rules public defender.
There is a podcast called The Rules Lawyer, but it is actually about being a lawyer, not a D&D podcast.
What?
There's
I
nobody.
like that. I like that title, but there may be some topics that don't deal specifically with the rules. So take that as you will.
I think it's going to be one of those things like every podcast is. It starts very clear and concise, but then like very quickly the topic is D&D, and that's just a title, right?
Sounds good to me. Print
Yeah,
it, ship it.
There's one called Nobody Likes a Rules Lawyer by Tavin and Mason. Shout out to you guys. I've never heard this podcast, but that's not the same title. There is not a single one just called that. So I think that's a pretty good D&D podcast title.
All right, go for it.
Man, that did not take a lot of convincing.
It's I mean, ultimately this was your idea, so I'm going to let it be your venture.
I'm looking for input on the title. So that may not be the final title, but I want to upload this by Friday.
Working title.
I want to upload this by Friday. Everyone, I'll make a channel, or we'll use. We have a direct
Jules and D&D schools.
There we go, dude. We have a combined message group, direct message group. Put your name ideas in there, and we'll pick one.
I'm gonna stick with that one. That's my idea. That's my.
All right, write it down in that thread that we have with me, you, and Isaac. Put it in there, and like after, I'll let everyone get a couple of suggestions in, and then we'll like vote. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you listened, awesome. You should be able to find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those places. Should. I gotta figure it out, but I know for sure Spotify.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See ya.
See ya.
Get out of here, Craig.
Get out of here, Craig. You awesome son of a bitch.